The radio chatter went silent at 8:47 hours, and that was when everyone knew something had gone catastrophically wrong. Over the Hindu Kush, where the mountains tore into the sky like broken teeth, an entire Marine recon unit had vanished from comms. 6 operators, call sign Reaper 6, had been moving through a valley so narrow the satellite imagery looked like a crack in the Earth's skull. They'd reported enemy contact, voices tight, professional, the kind of calm that comes before the storm. Then nothing, just static and the howl of wind across abandoned frequencies. At Bagram Airfield, the Joint Operations Center felt like a held breath. Screens glowed with thermal overlays and drone feeds showing nothing but rock and shadow. The valley was a dead zone, a place where signals went to die and helicopters couldn't fly low enough without getting shredded by terrain or RPG fire. The ground commander, a colonel with 23 years and a face like weathered stone, stared at the map as if he could will it to give answers. Someone had to go in. Someone always had to go in. That's when the name came up: Callahan. Lieutenant Colonel Nora Callahan, call sign Folklore, flying the ugliest, slowest, most brutally effective aircraft in the inventory. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog. There were newer pilots, faster jets, sleeker machines with precision munitions and computer-assisted targeting. But the Marines were in a valley where precision didn't matter. What mattered was firepower, endurance, and a pilot who could read a battlefield like a language only the desperate understood. Folklore had a reputation. 15 years in the cockpit, 2 combat deployments, and a string of close air support missions that had become legend in the ground-pounding community. But she also had something else: a 4-year-old daughter named Marin, a kid who drew pictures of airplanes with crayons and waited at home with Nora's mother while Mommy went to work. The other pilots knew this. Some respected it. Others whispered that single parents didn't belong in cockpits, that the fear of leaving a child behind made you hesitant, made you soft. Nora had heard the whispers. She'd learned to let them slide off like rain on titanium. When the tasking order came through, she was in the ready room, flight suit already on, helmet bag at her feet. The briefing was short. No air support available. No artillery in range. No extraction possible until someone cleared the valley floor. 6 Marines surrounded, taking fire from entrenched positions on 3 sides. The mission was simple in words, impossible in execution. Get in low. Find them. Keep them alive. Nora didn't ask questions. She just nodded, grabbed her helmet, and walked toward the flight line where her A-10 sat like a gray predator in the morning light. The Warthog wasn't beautiful. It was a flying gun platform, built around a 30mm rotary cannon that could shred armor and turn Earth into vapor. The twin engines sat high on the fuselage, ugly and exposed, designed to take hits and keep running. The cockpit was wrapped in a titanium bathtub, armor thick enough to stop small arms fire and shrapnel. It was slow, loud, and completely unforgiving. Nora loved it the way you love something that saved your life more than once. She ran her pre-flight with the kind of focus that looked like meditation. Checked the fuel, the ordnance, Maverick missiles, Hydra rockets, and a full combat load of 30mm rounds. 1,900 pounds of depleted uranium that could chew through anything stupid enough to stand still. The crew chief, a staff sergeant with grease-stained hands and a crooked grin, gave her a thumbs up. She returned it, climbed the ladder, and settled into the seat. The cockpit smelled like hydraulic fluid, sweat, and old leather. Home. She strapped in, ran the startup sequence, and felt the engines rumble to life behind her. The tower cleared her for takeoff, and she rolled onto the runway, throttle forward, the Warthog growling like it was angry at the sky. Wheels up at 9:12 hours. 18 minutes since Reaper 6 went silent. The flight to the valley took 32 minutes, and Nora spent every second of it running scenarios. The terrain was brutal, peaks over 14,000 feet, ridgelines that could hide entire companies, valleys so deep the sun barely touched the bottom. The Marines were somewhere in that maze, pinned down and running out of time. The enemy knew the ground, knew the angles, knew how to disappear into the rock. Nora didn't have a lot of options. She could go in high and try to spot them from altitude, but that meant less accuracy and more exposure to anti-aircraft fire. She could go in low, skimming the ridgelines, putting herself in the kill zone but giving the Marines a chance. There was no real choice. She pushed the stick forward and dropped altitude, the mountains rising around her like walls. The radio crackled to life. "Ground controller, call sign Anvil 2. His voice strained but controlled. "Folklore, Anvil 2. We've got intermittent comms with Reaper 6. They're taking heavy fire from elevated positions, northeast and southwest ridges. No visual on enemy strength. No friendly air in the area. You're it." Nora keyed the mic. "Copy, Anvil. Inbound to your position. Talk me onto the grid." She flew lower, the airspeed dropping to 280 knots, the wings steady despite the turbulence rolling off the peaks. Below, the valley opened up like a scar, narrow and shadowed. Somewhere down there, 6 men were fighting for their lives. Then she saw the smoke. Thin gray tendrils rising from a cluster of rocks on the valley floor. Not artillery smoke, small arms fire, maybe grenades. She banked left, eyes scanning the ridges. Movement. Muzzle flashes, small and quick, from a position about 300 meters up the northeast slope. She marked it mentally, then keyed the radio. "Anvil 2, Folklore. I've got eyes on enemy fire northeast ridge. Requesting confirmation on friendly position." A pause, then a different voice, rough, breathless, barely audible over gunfire. "Folklore, Reaper 6 actual. We're 200 meters south of the smoke, taking fire from multiple positions. Need immediate suppression northeast and southwest." Reaper 6 actual. The Marine commander himself on the radio. That meant things were bad. Nora's jaw tightened. "Reaper 6 Folklore, roger, marking your position. Stay low, guns coming in hot." She didn't wait for a response. She rolled the Warthog into a shallow dive, lined up the northeast ridge and squeezed the trigger. The GAU-8 Avenger roared to life. It didn't sound like a machine gun. It sounded like the world tearing in half. 70 rounds per second, depleted uranium, each one the size of a beer bottle. The ridge exploded in dust and shrapnel, stone fragments flying like shrapnel, the muzzle flashes disappearing in a curtain of devastation. Nora held the trigger for 3 seconds, then pulled up hard, banking right to avoid ground fire. Tracers arced up from the southwest ridge, green streaks cutting through the air. Close. Too close. She climbed, rolled, and came back around. The valley was alive now, the enemy responding, trying to track her. They weren't used to A-10s. Most insurgents trained against fast movers, F-16s, F-18s, jets that screamed overhead and dropped bombs from altitude. The Warthog was different. It stayed low, stayed slow, stayed angry. Nora lined up the southwest ridge and fired again, rockets this time, Hydra pods rippling off the wings in pairs. The explosions walked up the slope, orange fireballs and black smoke, the concussive force scattering fighters and silencing guns. She banked left, eyes on the valley floor. The Marines were moving now, she could see them, tiny figures in tan and green, bounding between cover, one man dragging another. They were trying to reach a cluster of boulders near the south end of the valley, a defensible position. But they weren't going to make it, not without more help. Nora keyed the mic. "Reaper 6 Folklore. You've got enemy reinforcements moving in from the north. I count 15 to 20 fighters. Stay in cover, I'm coming back around." She didn't hear a response, just the sound of gunfire and someone screaming orders. She rolled the Warthog into another attack run, lower this time, close enough to see the faces of the men shooting at her. She fired. The next 17 minutes were a blur of noise and adrenaline. Nora made 6 attack runs, each one a calculated dance between aggression and survival. She fired the cannon until the barrel glowed, launched every rocket, dropped both Mavericks on a cluster of enemy fighters dug into a cave entrance. The valley filled with smoke and dust, the air thick with cordite and burning metal. The Warthog took hits, small arms fire stitching across the wing, a bullet punching through the tail section. The aircraft shuddered but kept flying. That was the thing about the A-10, it didn't quit. The Marines reached the boulder cluster. Nora circled overhead, low on ammo but still watching, still ready. The radio crackled. "Folklore, Reaper 6 actual, we're secure, casualties but stable, you just saved 6 lives." Nora exhaled long and slow. Her hands were shaking, adrenaline bleeding off. She keyed the mic. Reaper 6, glad to hear it. Extraction inbound. Stay safe down there. She climbed out of the valley, the mountains falling away beneath her, the sky opening up blue and endless. The fuel gauge was low. The aircraft was shot to hell, but the Marines were alive. That was the mission. That was always the mission. She turned for Bagram, the warthog limping home. Back at base, the debrief was short. The colonel shook her hand, said something about valor and effectiveness. The other pilots were quieter than usual, watching her with something that looked like respect or maybe disbelief. One of them, a cocky captain named Rourke, muttered something about lucky and single parents just loud enough to be heard. Nora ignored him. She was too tired to care. She walked to her quarters, stripped off the flight suit, and sat on the edge of the bed. Her hands were still shaking. She thought about Marin, her daughter, the way she laughed when Nora read her stories about brave knights in distant kingdoms. Marin didn't know her mom flew into gunfire. She just knew Mommy flew airplanes and came home. That was the deal. Nora always came home. She picked up her phone, saw a message from her mother, a photo of Marin holding a drawing. It was an airplane, gray and crooked, with a big smile on the front. Under it, in red crayon, the words, "Mommy is brave." Nora stared at it for a long time. Then she set the phone down and lay back, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow there would be another mission, another valley, another group of people counting on her to show up. But tonight she let herself feel the weight of it, the fear, the responsibility, the knowledge that every time she climbed into that cockpit, she was choosing something bigger than herself. 3 days later, the whispers started again. A Navy SEAL team had been compromised during a raid in Helmand Province. Heavy contact, casualties, extraction impossible. The weather was turning, dust storms rolling in from the west, visibility dropping to zero. Helicopters were grounded. Fast movers couldn't see the ground. The SEALs were on their own, except they weren't. Because someone at the operations center remembered the pilot who'd pulled 6 Marines out of a valley no one thought was survivable. Someone remembered folklore. The tasking order came through at 1400 hours. Nora was in the middle of maintenance paperwork, signing off on repairs to her A-10. The crew chief found her, handed her the folder. She read it once, then looked up. "How bad?" The crew chief shrugged. "Bad enough they're asking for you by name." Nora nodded. She grabbed her helmet, walked to the flight line, and climbed into the cockpit. The warthog was patched up, the bullet holes sealed with aluminum tape, the systems checked and rechecked. It wasn't pretty, but it would fly. She started the engines, taxied to the runway, and took off into a sky turning the color of rust. This time, when she flew into the storm, she wasn't alone. The SEALs were waiting, and so was the enemy. The dust storm hit like a living thing. Nora flew through it at 500 feet, the visibility dropping to less than a quarter mile, the world outside the canopy turning into a swirling orange nightmare. The instruments were her eyes now: altimeter, heading indicator, radar showing the terrain rising and falling like waves. Flying in this was like threading a needle blindfolded while someone shook the table. But the SEALs didn't have time for her to wait it out. The radio crackled, a voice tight with controlled urgency. "Folklore, Cutlass 1, we're 2 clicks southwest of the LZ, taking effective fire from a fortified compound. Multiple buildings, heavy weapons. We've got 2 wounded, 1 critical. Need immediate air support." Cutlass 1, Navy SEALs. Nora had worked with them before, quiet, professional, the kind of operators who didn't call for help unless they were out of options. She keyed the mic. "Cutlass 1, Folklore, I'm inbound through the dust. Give me a mark on your position." A pause, then a short burst of static. "Popping IR strobe now." Nora dropped lower, eyes flicking to the targeting pod. The infrared strobe appeared on the screen, a blinking point of light in the chaos. She locked onto it, adjusted her heading, and pushed through the storm. The compound appeared like a ghost: low buildings, mud walls, vehicles scattered around a central courtyard. Muzzle flashes lit up the dust, tracers cutting through the murk. Nora circled once, mapping the terrain in her head. The SEALs were pinned down in a ditch about 100 meters south of the compound. The enemy was inside the buildings, firing from windows and rooftops. Smart, dug in. This wasn't going to be a quick gun run. She keyed the mic. "Cutlass 1, I've got eyes on. I'm going to work the north side first, try to draw fire away from your position. When I do, move your wounded toward the south wall. Extraction bird inbound in 15 mics. The SEAL commander's voice came back, calm despite the gunfire. Roger, Folklore, we're ready. Nora rolled into the attack. She came in low, the Warthog barely clearing the rooftops, and opened up with the GAU-8. The cannon roared, the rounds tearing through mud brick and rebar, collapsing walls and sending bodies tumbling. She pulled up, banked hard right, and came back around. Rockets next, rippling off the wings in pairs, each one punching through windows and detonating inside. The compound erupted in flames, black smoke pouring into the dust. The enemy fire intensified. Tracers followed her climb, stitching across the sky. One round punched through the left aileron. Another slammed into the engine cowling. The Warthog shook but didn't falter. Nora ignored the damaged lights flashing on the panel and focused on the mission. She made 4 more passes, each one closer than the last, each one taking more hits. The A-10's titanium bathtub saved her life twice, rounds sparking off the armor inches from her seat. By the time the extraction helicopter arrived, the compound was a burning ruin. The SEALs moved under cover of smoke and suppression fire, carrying their wounded, moving with the kind of speed that came from trust and training. Nora circled overhead, low on fuel and ordnance, the Warthog barely holding together. She watched the helo touch down, watched the SEALs load the wounded and lift off. Only then did she turn for home. The crew chief met her on the flight line, staring at the aircraft in disbelief. The left wing had 14 bullet holes. The tail section was shredded. One engine was trailing smoke. Nora climbed out, legs unsteady, and looked at the damage. "Can you fix it?" The crew chief laughed, shook his head. "I can fix anything, but you're gonna owe me a beer." Nora smiled, exhausted. "Put it on my tab." That night, the Navy liaison officer found her in the chow hall. He handed her a handwritten note from Cutlass One. It was short. "You fly like the devil himself is chasing you. Thanks for keeping us alive." Nora folded the note, put it in her pocket, and went back to eating. She didn't need thanks. She just needed the mission to matter. And it did, every time. Reputation grew. Word spread through the operational community. There was a pilot at Bagram who flew an A-10 like it was an extension of her will, who didn't flinch, who didn't quit, who came when called and left when the job was done. Folklore. The name stopped being a call sign and started being a title. Ground commanders requested her by name. Joint Terminal Attack Controllers, the men on the ground who directed airstrikes, asked if she was available. Other pilots noticed. Some respected it. Others resented it. Rourke, the captain with the loud mouth, made sure to remind everyone that Nora had a kid at home, that she was pushing 40, that she flew an outdated airframe. "She's good," he said once, leaning back in the ready room, "but she's not invincible. One of these days she's gonna hesitate, and that's when she dies." The room went quiet. Another pilot, a major named Cross, looked up from his tablet. "You ever fly close air support in a dust storm with 0 visibility and 15 guys counting on you not to screw up?" Rourke shrugged. "No, but I fly an F-16. I don't need to get that close." Cross stood up, walked over, and looked Rourke in the eye. "Then shut the hell up about things you don't understand." Rourke didn't say anything, but the resentment stayed. Nora didn't hear about the exchange until days later. She didn't care. She'd spent 15 years in a military that questioned whether women belonged in combat, whether mothers could be warriors, whether someone who cared about bedtime stories could also drop ordnance on human beings without blinking. She'd learned to stop proving herself and just do the work. The work was all that mattered, but the work was taking a toll. She felt it in her hands, the way they shook after long missions. She felt it in her sleep, the dreams where she was back in the valley, circling, searching for Marines she couldn't find. She felt it in the phone calls with Marin, the way her daughter asked when Mommy was coming home and Nora didn't have an answer. Her mother tried to help. "You don't have to keep doing this," she said during one call. "You've done enough. Marin needs you." Nora stared at the wall, the phone pressed to her ear. "Marin needs me to be someone she can be proud of. That means finishing what I started." Her mother sighed. "She's already proud of you, she just wants you alive." The call ended. Nora sat in silence, staring at the photo on her bunk, Marin in a pink dress, holding a toy airplane, grinning like the world was full of magic. Nora touched the photo, her finger tracing the outline of her daughter's face. Then she put it away and went back to work. The mission that changed everything came without warning. A remote outpost in the Korangal Valley, one of the most dangerous places in Afghanistan, had been overrun. 38 soldiers, Army infantry, support personnel, a handful of Afghan National Army troops were trapped inside a perimeter barely 200 meters across. The enemy had launched a coordinated assault at dawn, hitting the outpost with mortars, rockets, and small arms fire from 3 directions. Soldiers fought back, but they were outnumbered and running low on ammunition. The call for air support went out at 6:20 hours. Nora was already in the air, flying a routine patrol when the tasking order came through. The controller's voice was strained, almost frantic. Folklore, Anvil 3, we've got a broken arrow situation at Firebase Viper. 38 souls under sustained attack. All available air is tasked elsewhere. You're the only asset in range. Time on station. Immediate. Broken arrow. The code for a unit in danger of being overrun, the code that meant everything else stopped and everyone came running. Except there was no one else, just Nora. She checked her fuel, her ordnance. She had enough for maybe 30 minutes over the target, maybe 6 gun runs. It wasn't enough, but it was what she had. She keyed the mic. Anvil 3 Folklore, I'm inbound. Give me the grid and the threat assessment. The controller rattled off coordinates and enemy positions. Nora punched them into the computer and turned southeast, pushing the throttle forward. The Korangal Valley was a nightmare of terrain, steep ridges, thick vegetation, villages clinging to the mountainsides like barnacles. It was called the Valley of Death for good reason. The enemy knew every trail, every ambush point, every place to hide and wait. Firebase Viper sat on a small plateau, surrounded by high ground. A perfect kill zone. Nora saw the smoke before she saw the base. Black columns rising into the morning sky, the outpost barely visible through the haze. She dropped altitude, skimming the ridgeline, and got her first look at the situation. It was worse than the briefing suggested. The perimeter was breached in 2 places. Enemy fighters were inside the wire, moving between buildings. The defenders were clustered near the command post, firing from behind sandbags and rubble. Bodies lay scattered across the compound. Nora felt the cold clarity of combat settle over her. No fear, no hesitation, just the mission. She keyed the mic. Viper Actual Folklore, I'm overhead. Where do you need me? The response was immediate, the voice raw with exhaustion. Folklore, Viper Actual, we've got enemy inside the wire northeast corner. Friendlies are marked with orange panels. Hit everything else. Orange panels. Nora scanned the compound, saw the bright squares of fabric on the rooftops near the command post. She locked them into her mental map, then rolled into the attack. The GAU-8 roared, the cannon rounds ripping through the northeast corner, bodies and debris flying. She pulled up, banked, came back around. Rockets next, slamming into the breach, sealing it with fire and shrapnel. The Warthog took fire. Heavy machine gun, maybe a 14.5 rounds punching through the fuselage. She ignored it. For the next 27 minutes, Nora flew a pattern over Firebase Viper that would later be described in after-action reports as sustained defensive air support under extreme conditions. She made 11 gun runs, expending every round in the cannon. She fired every rocket. She dropped her last Maverick on a group of fighters massing for another assault. When she ran out of ordnance, she kept flying, circling low, drawing fire away from the soldiers on the ground. The enemy couldn't ignore an A-10. It was too loud, too visible, too threatening. They shot at her instead of the defenders. That was the point. The Warthog took 63 hits. Rounds tore through the wings, the fuselage, the tail. One engine caught fire. Nora shut it down, switched to the remaining engine, and kept flying. The flight controls were sluggish, the hydraulics failing. The aircraft was dying beneath her, but the soldiers were still alive. That was all that mattered. The radio crackled. Folklore, Viper Actual, enemy is retreating, we're secure, you saved our lives. Nora didn't respond, she didn't have the words. She just turned the crippled Warthog toward Bagram and prayed she'd make it. She did, barely. The landing was rough, the aircraft skidding off the runway, coming to rest in the dirt with smoke pouring from the engine. Nora climbed out, legs shaking, and collapsed on the tarmac. The crew chief ran over, saw the damage, and swore, "How the hell are you alive?" Nora looked up at the sky, then closed her eyes. "I don't know." The medal ceremony happened 3 weeks later. Nora stood at attention while a general pinned the Distinguished Flying Cross to her uniform, reading a citation that described her actions in clinical terms: courage under fire, exceptional airmanship, devotion to duty. The words felt hollow. Medals didn't bring back the soldiers who died before she got there. They didn't fix the warthog that was now sitting in pieces in a hangar. They didn't make her hands stop shaking. But when the ceremony ended, something unexpected happened. The soldiers from Firebase Viper were there, all 38 of them standing in formation, watching. When Nora walked past, they saluted, not the quick, perfunctory salute of military courtesy, the slow, deliberate salute of respect. One of them, a young sergeant with a bandage on his head, stepped forward. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say, you're the reason I'm going home to my kid, so thank you." Nora felt something crack inside her chest. She nodded, unable to speak. The sergeant saluted again and stepped back into formation. Nora walked away before anyone could see the tears. That night she called Marin. Her daughter answered on the second ring, breathless and excited. "Mommy, Grandma said you got a medal. Are you a hero?" Nora smiled, the first real smile in weeks. "No, baby, I'm just a pilot. Heroes are the people on the ground." Marin paused, thinking. "But you help them, right?" "I try." "Then you're a hero too." Nora closed her eyes, listening to her daughter's voice, and let herself believe it. Just for a moment. The deployment ended 2 months later. Nora flew her last mission on a clear morning, a routine patrol that felt almost peaceful. When she landed, the crew chief handed her a flag, the guidon from Firebase Viper, signed by every soldier she'd saved. She held it carefully, reading the names, remembering the faces. The flight home was long. Nora spent most of it staring out the window, watching the world pass beneath her, mountains and deserts and oceans, all of it distant and unreal. She thought about the missions, the firefights, the moments when she'd been certain she was going to die. She thought about the people she'd saved and the ones she couldn't. She thought about Marin, waiting at home, growing up in a world Nora was trying to make safer. When the plane landed, her mother was there, holding Marin's hand. Nora walked down the steps, dropped her bag, and knelt down. Marin ran to her, arms wide, and Nora caught her, holding tight. "I missed you, Mommy." "I missed you too, baby." Marin pulled back, looked at her seriously. "Are you going to fly again?" Nora glanced at the sky, then back at her daughter. "Not for a while. Right now I'm just going to be here." Marin smiled, and in that moment Nora felt something she hadn't felt in months: peace. The war would go on, other pilots would fly, other missions would be flown, but for now she was home. And that was enough. Years passed. Nora left active duty, transitioned to the reserves, then eventually retired. She took a job as a flight instructor, teaching the next generation of pilots the skills that had kept her alive. She flew civilian aircraft, small planes that didn't shake when they took off, didn't have cannons, didn't fly into gunfire. Marin grew up. She went to college, studied engineering, talked about joining the Air Force. Nora didn't try to stop her. She just told her the truth, that the job was hard, that it would take everything, that it would break her and rebuild her into something different. Marin listened, nodded, and said, "You did it. So can I?" Nora smiled. "Yeah, you can." One day, Nora got a call from the Air Force. They were holding a ceremony at Bagram, now a quiet Afghan-controlled base, to honor the pilots who'd flown close air support during the war. They wanted her to speak. Nora almost said no. But then she thought about the soldiers at Firebase Viper, the Marines in the valley, the SEALs in the dust storm. She thought about all the voices on the radio, desperate and brave, trusting her to show up. She said yes. The ceremony was small. A handful of veterans, a few officers, some Afghan officials. Nora stood at the podium, looking out at the faces, and spoke. "I flew because someone had to. I flew because people were counting on me. I flew because the job mattered. But I didn't fly alone. Every mission there were crew chiefs, controllers, ground troops, and other pilots making it possible. So this isn't my story, it's ours." She paused, looked at the horizon. "And it's not over. The next generation is coming. They'll fly faster, smarter, better. But I hope they remember what we learned, that the mission isn't about the aircraft or the medals. It's about the people you bring home." The applause was quiet, respectful. Afterward, a young pilot approached her, a lieutenant barely 25, flying A-10s out of the same squadron Nora had once led. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say, your call sign is still legendary. We talk about folklore in the ready room. The missions you flew, the risks you took, it's inspiring." Nora studied the young woman, saw the same fire she'd once had. "What's your call sign?" "Whisper," Nora smiled. "Good name, fly safe, Whisper, and when they need you, be there." The lieutenant saluted. Nora returned it, and in that moment she understood. The legacy wasn't about her. It was about what came next. The sky didn't belong to any one pilot. It belonged to everyone willing to fly into the fire, to risk everything, to bring people home. Nora walked away from the ceremony, the sun setting over the mountains, the same mountains she'd once flown through with nothing but skill and stubbornness keeping her alive. She thought about Marin, about Whisper, about all the pilots who would come after. The enemy had claimed the skis once, but they didn't anymore, because someone had been willing to fight for them, and someone always would.